Welcome back. It's Sunday, AFN Live. I'm your host, Michael Washington Weeks. At AFN Talk across all social media, afntalk.com, afnn.net, in partnership with primetimesportstalk.com. Tonight, I have my co-host, RJ Ciancio, with me. I have my other co-host, Mark Angst, with me, and I have Bryce Burge here discussing some important news coming out of the indoor and arena leagues. 310-876-8064. We're going to talk CFL tonight as well. We have a CFL edition, a special edition show that we did last week. We have the playoff picture that is now shaking out. Key injury took place in a game that was deciding a possible playoff berth as well as that. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. Also, expansion possibilities in the NAL. We have two teams that are coming back. One apparently is committed. The other one still hasn't quite, even though the announcement was made they're coming back, has not been fully committed just yet. We'll discuss what's going on with the National Arena League with that as well. It's Sunday. We're on the eve of the XFL draft. We have two special shows coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. Wanted to make sure I mentioned that real quick before we jumped into our big news out of the Arena League. Last week, we discussed the Champions Indoor Football partnership with the National Arena League that was slated for 2020. As it has now been released and it is official that that partnership is off for the 2020 season. While it's still on the table to move forward for future years, it appears that scheduling was the key factor involved with this. I want to bring Bryce Burge in here from Arena Football Talk real quick to kind of get a little bit of more detail and in-depth on this. We knew, well, I had brought up and asked last week if the scheduling was going to fall on CIF side or if it was going to fall on NAL side, because those schedules didn't meet up from the way that they ran their seasons. Is this the key factor as to what caused this partnership to fall through? Was just they couldn't find a way to make it work?
Well, that's what they're saying, but I think they were stressing more along the lines of the fact that with the way that the seasons were lined up traditionally with the arenas and the places that they play, you get other arenas that will, bring in concerts, they'll bring in monster truck shows, they'll bring in giant conventions or Comic-Con type things like that. And those can be difficult to reschedule. And especially if there's a lot of history and a lot of cultural desire behind them, to kind of throw in something like this is a little difficult. And especially with it being for this upcoming year, it would make a lot more sense if they were working on this and then decided to have it for next season. So that way, when they were talking with their arenas, they'd be kind of saying like, we're going to have a couple extra games with this kind of stuff, help us block it off. And in this case, they weren't able to get it done this year. Ultimately, I think it's a good thing with the way that so many things were unclear regarding partnership versus merger. That whole thing just seems to have come from the fruit of a poisonous tree. And I'm glad that they have to pump the brakes for one reason or the other, just so that way they can get it done right if they choose to keep on pushing it.
Yeah, from the official statement from the NationalArenaLeague.com, to kind of echo what you were saying, quote, we knew the partnership we were proposing included a very aggressive timetable to implement. Those were the words of the CIF Commissioner Ricky Burtz. Quote, both of our leagues had significantly different starting and ending times for our seasons. When we attempted to coordinate a full schedule that worked for all teams involved, many previously available arena dates were no longer available. After lengthy discussions, NAL Commissioner Chris Siegfried and I decided the best not to proceed together this season. Chris then went on to say it was important for both of our leagues to make sure our teams played schedules that made sense and wouldn't compromise the on-field product in the process. So it appears that this is something that like you said, where the arena started just making schedules, for other events that were happening. Realistically, RJ, the timetable was never going to be met, even though the proposal had been discussed since June. 2020 just seemed like it was way too aggressive of a timeline.
I think so too, and I am glad they were able to pump the brakes on this one, because honestly, you don't want to rush into these things. It's hard enough to find people in these leagues who can put aside their ego and say, hey, let's work together. I can just cite you to the IFL, CIF having issues with each other due to the Bloomington Edge and West Michigan Ironman a couple of years back, and not getting over that, but that was more legal than other things. So with the NAL and CIF, saying, listen, we're not saying it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen this year. I think that's smart. You don't want to mess with any arena dates, because what's worse than just canceling this partnership, postponing this partnership, is we're going to have it and then say, oh, darn it, someone's making a playoff run, we can't play this game. And you've wasted all this time hyping it up. And you don't want that. Interleague play is important, but it's important to have sustainable dates that are reserved just for you and not contingent on, well, if this team doesn't make their minor league playoff game, then you can have the venue. As you saw in the AAL, the Carolina Energy got kicked out of Bojangles Arena, Coliseum, because the Charlotte Checkers made a playoff run, and they couldn't play, so they took a controversial bye.
Yeah. I was going to bring up the AAL if you hadn't right there. Bryce, there was some rumors, or I don't want to say rumors, but there was some speculation that the leaked information that came out, which all signs pointed to from the CIF side of things, with the terminology of merger versus partnership, which the NAL never made any qualms that it wasn't anything other than a partnership. Do you think that, on your personal, professional opinion, do you think that was something that contributed to this as well, from the standpoint of it not just being the scheduling, it's also the fact that this merger versus partnership terminology was getting muddled?
Yes. 100% yes. And like, that's not necessarily as a shot at anybody. I think it's more along the lines was that if you're confused over that aspect, those words, we've talked about it before. I've talked about it on AFT before. Those words have legal meanings, and legal meanings, they may sound semantics to us, but for lawyers, for businessmen, for people that have to deal with the taxes and the filings and the intellectual properties, those words have considerable legal differences. And if you aren't on the same page with that, how much are you really on the same page? That I think is really kind of the big deal with it at all, because you can share references and you can share resources and you can come together and merge your opportunities with different things that don't actually call a merger. And if you have those kind of leaks that are coming up, and whether or not that aspect added into whether or not the Massachusetts Pirates decided to say with the NAL, those things are really important in terms of knowing where you stand with each other. And I think that it is extremely, extremely important that people started to figure that out, because even when they announced it, they both had the same video popped up. And on the official NAL Facebook page, they said, our partnership video, announcement video. And on the CIF, it says our merger announcement video. I screenshot both of those, put them on Facebook, and in 4 hours, the CIF had changed the wording on their announcement. I think that is more telling than anything else. And that tweet is still up there if you want to bury them. They're a little buried now with some information from the soccer and football games at my local newspaper job. But if you still want to go back and look for that tweet, it is still there and very much public for anybody to see, just the difference in the language between the two of them, in case if you are curious about that.
Yeah, that was super important to to be able to grab and get a hold of. You mentioned the Massachusetts Pirates, and RJ, I want to bring you in on this just for your personal preference as far as this is concerned here, because this is something that you and I had discussed, with a few other people prior about the Massachusetts Pirates. One of the unfortunate fallout of the partnership with the CIF was the Massachusetts Pirates were going to leave the NAL for the 2020 season. They didn't have a league, and now that the partnership has fallen through, the Massachusetts Pirates have announced that they will be rejoining the NAL. We know that their head coach moved on to Carolina after Billy Back went to Spokane. This is going to be something that's going to be, I think, beneficial for the NAL, especially if Maine does a 100% commit. Do you think that the Massachusetts Pirates are something that is a positive for the NAL to be able to kind of put a lot of this partnership talk with the CIF behind and kind of make people focus on just the NAL for the 2020 season?
I think it's great to have the Pirates back. I don't like that they left in the first place, and I'm not happy, and I'm not super pumped that the partnership had to be put on hold for a bit, but I am happy to see the Pirates back in the NAL. They're the closest thing the Mammoths will have to a travel partner, and away games cost you a boatload of money. I mean, if you get rid of the Pirates, the closest team to Maine would be the Cobras. You're going over halfway down the East Coast, so I think it's good travel-wise. Now, I wasn't a fan of a few of the comments that were made by the Pirates when they originally left, but I think the NAL needs to focus internally this year, let some bygones be bygones, and honestly, I'm happy to see him back. Hopefully they'll draw some better crowds this year, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm excited to have him back too, because they're close to me as well, and Maine being back as well is something that I'm excited for, to be able to catch games as well. And I mentioned that with Massachusetts coming back, it be the tipping point for Maine to fully commit to sign their letter of intent or whatever it may be. We'll discuss that in the next segment. 310-876-8064 at AFN Talk across all social media platforms. We'll be right back.
The Alternative Football News Network. History in the making.
Welcome back to AFN Live. As the voiceover guy just said, we're on the eve of the XFL draft. It's a 2-day draft, Tuesday and Wednesday. We will be doing an XFL Now special on Tuesday and Wednesday to discuss that draft as well. Before the break, we were discussing the CIF NAL partnership that has been postponed, it appears, for the 2020 season and can be revisited for the 2021 season. We were starting to talk about some of the teams that had the fallout from the partnership to begin with, Massachusetts Pirates coming back. Before the partnership was announced, the Maine Mammoths were announced officially that they were going to be coming back and joining the NAL as a return team, with Rob Storm as the, I'm assuming, owner at this point. Bryce, what is the deal with Maine right now? You had mentioned a little bit ago that they had not signed their letter of intent yet to play in the 2020 season. What's the status of the Maine Mammoths moving forward for the 2020 season?
Well, at this point, they still have to make sure that even though that they want this team back, and they want to make sure that they're replacing New York as a team in the Northeast area. This is a big struggle right now to make sure that now that they've announced this team, that the ownership that they have is the group that they want to have in there, and that they are financially stable enough to do this on their own. If they are not, then they may have to pair up with another potential buyer and kind of tag team it between the groups. And so it is a difficult situation right now to figure out the individual versus group versus multiple entities scenario. But at this point, it looks like things have more questions than solutions, and Maine is still kind of left in no man's land because they don't have somebody willing to bring home the the loose franchise. It's almost kind of like a lost dog that's been out. Like, you recognize the dog, you try to get it to come with you, but it kind of just wants to stay out in the middle of nowhere by itself, kind of deal. That's kind of like what I'm getting from this scenario.
It's a good analogy. Your best educated guess here. Do you expect Maine to be back in 2020?
No.
No, at this particular moment in time, that would be unfortunate, honestly.
Especially after they announced it, and that's kind of the big deal. I mean, Maine was a successful program if they have somebody with money that can oversee things in a local area. And I think that they are working with people to get front office staff and that kind of stuff in there. But if they do not have the cash flow to do that, do you pair up with a Rob Storm in Carolina? And there were reports out of Carolina that things were a lot more financially rough with the former coaching staff and administration there than ever before. Those rumors have gotten considerably louder. So while I do not doubt Rob Storm's ability to make sure that he's got enough to keep Carolina afloat, does he have enough to really risk by putting that into a situation in Maine? Not really sure, but at the exact same time, it's kind of rough because from a business standpoint, what do? Do you just kind of let it sit dormant and wait till somebody comes around, kind of like just a house 3 counties over because you moved away and that house is just sitting on the market? Or do you want to have it more like a business where it's up and running even though that you've got it on the market to sell it to somebody, but really you're just kind of hoping it buys off so you can go on your retirement? It's an odd place to see what the Mammoths are, to see what they can do, and depending on who's involved depends on what this franchise means to them.
Well, I know for one, just my own personal biased opinion, I would love to have them back in the NAL for 2020 season, and hopefully they can get that figured out. RJ, I'm assuming that you're probably in the same boat in this situation, that you would rather see Maine come back because they were a positive franchise, and we discussed when it was announced that how much it was something that the NAL had needed, especially with everything that happened negatively with the league towards the end of the year last year.
Definitely, so Bryce brought up Rob Storm working with the Cobras and possibly working with the Mammoths. I was interested in looking at the Mammoths season ticket phone number. I called it, redirected me to the Carolina Cobras, so that's not the most positive sign ever. You have the fact when you read the article that the NAL put out, the Maine Mammoths Awaken, that was released on Friday, September 20th of this year. It says just in the first few sentences, the National Arena League is excited to announce the expected return of the Maine Mammoths.
Well, I know for sure
Yeah.
and I know for sure that we hope that they come back. That's for sure.
Well, everything's going to be decided in the next 48 hours, roughly, because October 15th, that's when your letter of credit is due per the NAL website under the Expansion Opportunities tab. So, if there's no letter of credit that's being sent in by October 15th, not happening. So, it's crunch time to see if the Mammoths are coming back. And if not, and you're already scheduling stuff, then you got to look at saying, okay, if we can't put the Mammoths out there this year, but we have scheduling vacancies all of a sudden, how can we bring in another team? Example I might throw out is West Virginia to fill those dates at away games, as they might have already been looking at them to join the league.
Yeah, and that's going to be, so the next 48 hours is going to be very telling for the NAL and definitely for the Maine Mammoths as well. It's something that we are going to be keeping our eye on here. Speaking about keeping our eye on stuff, the Orlando Predators situation last year was a nightmare. Bryce broke a lot of things that took place. Balin Trujillo, the former quarterback of the team, released a lot of negative and unfortunate circumstances surrounding that team. It was announced within the last few days that the Orlando Predators will return with new ownership and a new coaching staff. Bryce, what can you tell us here, and what does this mean for the Predators franchise and Kenny McIntyre, the former owner?
Well, there's lots of aspects to this, so we'll just kind of break them down into little chunks. One is that now that this is coming out with the blessing of the National Arena League, the league that is primarily the most press unfriendly. I mean, that's maybe not the best term, but interacts with the press the worst out of the AFL, the IFL, and the NAL. They act with the press the worst because they are a league that is made up of former players and people that are businessmen, and they're not necessarily people that deal with marketing and deal with public relations and stuff like that. So for them to give the vouching of new ownership in the mix in Orlando actually gives this kind of extra boost of confidence to say that Orlando's heading in the right direction. Now, in that release, they did not name who was in. They did not name who sold shares. They did not name who was less of an owner or anything like that. They just said that there was new blood. And that has two extra aspects to it. Is one, with all the things that we know about Kenny McIntyre, people not getting paid, commingling of funds, which is sometimes but not always illegal, the checks that were being routed through the team's official cab company, which is unquestionably illegal because that's fraud. In this case, wire fraud because it's done through a credit card. There's no question that there were improper things going on in Orlando last year, and people wanted Kenny McIntyre out. Now, the thing is if they were able to successfully force him to get rid of his shares, or if he still has his shares and all the other shares of the team were bought by other people, that's one thing. There was also a potential possibility where Kenny McIntyre allegedly sold shares to the team or a buy-in of the team through the expansion process. There's about 3 or 4 people saying that they bought small amount of shares that really were not too overly influential, but would, again, shake up the overall percentage of what the ownership of the Orlando Predators are, which could impact who has majority and stuff like that. The reason why this is a big deal about how this impacts Kenny McIntyre and who else is in Orlando really just kind of means that it's up in the air still, and there will be some possibility for different things. Not naming the people avoids the ability for that to be negative or on the record, which is really important. If you see these press releases, they pop up on Wikipedia as works cited all the time. If that were to be the case and come into an issuance of public record through a news story or Wikipedia, then there could be some possible civil litigation problems, or if there's civil litigation problems on the horizon, keeping people's names out of it is definitely a safer way to go about it. So while it's odd for the rest of us to see this kind of behavior and to see a press release written like that, I know a lot of the fans are unhappy with the lack of information. I think this is very on par with how the NAL operates. And while I may not like it all the time, I can tell you that I believe full-heartedly and wholeheartedly that the NAL and Chris Siegfried is always doing their absolute best for the league, the teams, and the fans. And so it's very much on par in that regards that positive changes are happening to Orlando, and we may or may not eventually hear more about this, but it's enough to keep Orlando in the fray for the 2020 season and to expect the Predators to be back.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a positive direction. I think anybody can definitely say that follows the NAL that anything is a better direction than what we saw last year, especially on a competitive standpoint, what the on-field product is going to look like, the turnover that they went through last year, not to mention all the other issues that they had that came out after the end of the season. This is something that I am looking forward to seeing how this plays out and how this produces along the lines of what the team is going to look like next year. 310-876-8064. That is the phone number if you want to join in on this discussion and talk to us Thank you, Bryce, for all that information pertaining to Orlando. We really appreciate that, and it will be something that we'll monitor moving forward. We have CFL discussion at AFN Talk across all social media if you want to join us as well. AFNtalk.com, AFNN.net. CFL has the playoff shakeup. We will be discussing that in a moment.
The Alternative Football News Network. History in the making.
2 days away. 2 days away from the XFL draft. It's a 2-day affair. We will be doing an XFL special on Tuesday and Wednesday discussing the draft as well. At AFN Talk across all social media platforms, you can interact with us, engage with us, discuss things with us, anything that we talk about, whether it's on social media or on our shows. At AFN Talk is across all social media platforms. 310-876-8064. You can talk to us live. Give us a call. We'll discuss it with you. We're not afraid here. Give us a call. AFNtalk.com, AFNN.net. Mr. Mark Angst is here with us tonight. We got some CFL action that took place over the weekend. How are you, Mark? How's everything going on your end?
I'm doing good. Was enjoying listening to that talk about the NAL. Excited to dive into that for the first time this season because as our producer, I kind of watched the last couple games and was very, very excited about how those games went and how good they look. So I'm excited to get into that.
It's a little bit different when you dive into it yourself instead of just having somebody dump all that on you, whether you wanted to or not, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and for you listeners out there, that's pretty much what I did to Mark in the offseason. Anyways, CFL talk. So I wanted to discuss mainly the Edmonton Eskimos and BC Lions game because this game was important for the Eskimos as much as it was the Lions because the Lions needed to win out to clinch the crossover spot in the playoffs. The Eskimos win and they're in. The Eskimos were without their starting quarterback, Trevor Harris, and on the second possession of the game, offensive possession for the game for the BC Lions, highest paid quarterback, one of the most decorated overall CFL players in the history of the CFL, Mike Riley, suffered an apparent broken wrist. The game was not out of reach at this point, and the Lions were in the Edmonton Reds when this injury happened. Mark, this injury was devastating to the Lions and pretty much ended all playoff hopes for them. Even with Danny O'Brien being a veteran at the backup quarterback spot, it's just he's too well traveled, and they never looked the same.
They did not. I mean, Danny O'Brien came in and he just didn't look good. Didn't seem to kind of run that offense the same way Riley didn't. I mean, they've struggled this year. BC did until late. So, that team overall isn't great. It wasn't going to be able to win without Riley. He was kind of the main reason. He finally was getting comfortable in with his new team here, started picking it up late. But, I mean, you're only down 3-0, and you're about to score, whether you're going to get tied up 3-3, go up 7-3, and then that happens. And it just I don't know, completely derailed the team. If they all just kind of like, we're done and didn't really rally. But at that point of the game, they just didn't hold on. And to be honest, Edmonton didn't look much better even getting the win.
No, yeah, and we'll discuss a little bit about Edmonton here. I just want to make the quick comment about BC on the sense of it's kind of symbolic to how their year has been. I mean, Mike Riley's been the most hit quarterback in the CFL. That offensive line has been downright nightmarish. And the fact that it took this long for Riley to suffer any type of significant injury is mind-blowing that he lasted week 17. And it's something that I think a lot of BC fans probably expected, but as you were saying, they were just starting to settle in. They were playing better ball. They still had an outside shot. And with the way that Edmonton had been playing without Trevor Harris, this was something that could have been feasible up until that point. It's unfortunate that Mike Riley's season ends this way, but the BC Lions can now just kind of, go through the next few games, try to play spoiler if they're able to. But right now I want to shift focus a little bit here, because the other team that was involved in this game, the Edmonton Eskimos, they clinched the playoff spot. They only scored, 19 points? I think they won 19-6.
It was, yeah, with 3 points
19
in the last 2 seconds of the game. I don't even know why they kicked it.
Yeah, so it was 16-6 up until the last few seconds of the game. They, like you said, they didn't look very good, but they're without Trevor Harris. But Harris is due back. Now, the question I propose to anybody that follows the CFL, as a playoff contender, well, as a playoff team, I should say, because you clinched, do you wait and continue to play in Kilgore at the quarterback position and let Trevor Harris get that extra rest heading into the playoffs? Or do you bring Harris back to try to get back into a rhythm, into a groove, and hope that he doesn't get hurt? I guess is the best way to put it. Because you don't want to rush a guy back, especially a guy like Trevor Harris. But at the same time, you don't kind of want him going in cold into the first playoff game. What are your thoughts on that situation in Edmonton?
Personally, for me, if they hadn't clinched and he'd be cleared to play, that's when he should come back. So they should play it as if they haven't clinched a spot at this point, and see what happens and let them get the work in they need. I mean, honestly, they still do have a chance. I don't know all the tiebreakers, but they're only 4 points behind the other 3 teams in the West Division. So, with them having 2 more games to play, if they win both, that would be the same amount of points. If those 3 teams or one of the 3 lose, now you're playing one of them. So it's still some things to play for.
Yeah, but BC has actually been mathematically eliminated.
No, but so Edmonton still has a chance to be the 2 or 3 seed in the West. Right now, they're looking like they're the crossover.
Sorry, I went back to BC. I apologize. That's right. You're talking about Edmonton. That's right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. So, yeah. I mean, you technically still have some things to play for. You have a bye this week. So if he was going to be cleared for the following week anyway, he should play. If he wasn't going to be cleared till the final week of the season, he should play. If he isn't cleared till the postseason, then that's when he should play. Holding him out doesn't help this offense, because all you're doing is getting guys work with a different quarterback, and we all know quarterbacks are not the same across the board. It does not matter whether they've worked in the same system for years together or not. They're not the same. They don't throw passes the same. They don't cadence the same. You don't get all those things, and you, as an offense, you lose out if you're not getting your starter who's going to be in the playoffs. So bring him back when he's ready. That's what I say.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. It's always that same old narrative, you get into the situation of moving forward with an offense. You've been out a few weeks. The team is adjusting to the way that Kilgore's been playing the position. Trevor Harris had been there, at a fairly high level. He was one of my he was one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch all year this year. And obviously the injury kind of deflated the Eskimos. They've kind of just gotten by a little bit. I feel with the bye week being this week, if they didn't have the bye week this week, I would think that you would still have to hold him out one more week, regardless if he was cleared. And I only say that because there's something different than practicing on 5 days instead of 10. And through this bye week situation where they don't have to prepare for this game, he can come back in and practice over the course of, a 7 to 10 day stretch, and kind of they can start implementing him back into it, letting the offensive players get back to the comfortability and the familiarity of having him under center instead of Kilgore. And it gives them the opportunity and chance to get back to that, this is the rhythm that we had with him. This is the rhythm that we're going to have with him when he comes back officially for a game. So, and like you said, they do have something to play for. So I think the best bet for them would be holding him out for at least one more week, regardless, at least from the game time. And, with the bye week, I think it's beneficial for him to come back for the next game. So I agree with you there for sure. Absolutely. BC, though, moving forward for them, there's 3-year deal contracts up there in the CFL. Mike Riley signed the biggest contract, and I wanted to come back to this because quarterback play has been something that's been so important to the CFL. And this year alone, there's been so many starting quarterbacks that have gone down and been hurt. We know that most of the star quarterbacks signed 3-year deals. BC is going to have to do something with this offensive line to be able to protect Riley moving forward. Is the offensive line or the lack of weapons the bigger concern in BC, do you think, Mark? Because I want to ask this question because this is something that's been kind of like watching the BC over the course of the last few games. I think there's some guys that might be overhyped on the quote unquote skill position players, and it's not necessarily as much the offensive line's fault.
See, for me, it's offensive line. You must protect the quarterback, and you need to get that offensive line better. The quarterback can make up for skill position deficiencies, but he can't do it if he's on his back. So work on the offensive line. I'm not, the CFL, you get the draft, you get free agency, you can do some work, try to make some splash plays, but work on that O-line first and then see what happens. This year they start to play well here at the end. Maybe if they'd play well, at the beginning of the year, we've talked about things differently, but bring in a better O-line, let Riley work, and maybe he can make up for some of these guys, supposedly in the skill position that aren't good enough or don't seem to be good enough. And, could that be because he's on the run and that's just not his game? He's more of the, I want to stand back there, throw, move around if I have to, but not really run around like I have been because I don't have time.
Well, I only bring it up because a lot of the sacks and a lot of the hits that Riley has taken, I feel it's been from him holding onto the ball trying to make something happen because the lack of his receivers being able to get open and the dump downs and checkoffs aren't always there. John White was hurt a few times. He's their best pass catching running back. And I only bring it up in that sense because if your skill position players can't get open and create space, Mike Riley's not a spring chicken anymore. He's not going to scramble that much. So he's going to try to sit in the pocket and make plays. And I feel that the last few games where they were working on getting the ball out sooner was a coaching decision to start saying we're going to run shorter routes, so you're creating space off the line compared to where you were doing it a little bit further downfield, and it kind of helped Riley not get sacked as much. So
and you made a point there. They changed the coaching decision. So could this not be a skill position player, wide receiver problem? Could it be a coaching problem? Could they have been calling too big of plays that made Riley hold the ball longer? We look back at quarterbacks his size over the years, and sometimes they do that because they know they can kind of take the hits. But if you're not able to move around a little bit or and get that little extra space, those longer routes then don't hit, and then you get hit, and it just all looks bad.
Yeah, and that's, again, this is all fun speculation. It all gives us something to discuss and talk about, how much of it is offensive line. Does it help the skill position players? Skill position players, does it help the offensive line? We both know that they're both important to the quarterback play. 310-876-8064 at AFN Talk across all social media platforms. Join in on the discussion. Give us a call. Talk to us. We had a CFL special last week. This week, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the shakeups. All 6 teams, as far as the playoffs are concerned in the CFL, are locked in now. We did our predictions earlier. We discussed them as well. Now we're going to kind of look at a little bit more of what to expect moving forward, especially with teams getting healthy.
The Alternative Football News Network. History in the making.
The New York Guardians, February 2020. The XFL draft is 2 days away. We have a draft special that's going to be happening on Tuesday, a draft special happening on Wednesday as well. 310-876-8064. That's the number you can call. We'll discuss the XFL draft picks. We're going to see what the New York Guardians roster will look like finally as we head up and gear up for the 2020 season. At AFN Talk across all social media platforms, afntalk.com, afnn.net. in association with PrimetimeSportsTalk.com. CFL news for now. Playoffs. All 6 teams are set. Still, the Western Conference is cluttered at the top. I want to talk a little bit about the Western Conference because the schedule moving up forward is going to determine a lot about the seeds. Right now, Calgary sits at 1. Saskatchewan is at 2. Winnipeg is at 3. Calgary 10-5, Saskatchewan 10-5, Winnipeg 10-6. Calgary plays Winnipeg this week, and Winnipeg just came off another big victory with Chris Streveler looking like a different quarterback than what he did 2 weeks ago. Winnipeg still very much is in this. Mark, home field advantage or that 1 seed is locked in the East. Montreal has no chance of catching Hamilton in that sense. In the West, which team benefits, in your opinion, the most from having the home field advantage, if it is even an advantage at this point in time?
Which team benefits the most? I would say that's probably Winnipeg, only because they're working on their backup quarterback, so it gives them that extra week to plan, kind of to get things set right. And I know Trevor's been playing for a few weeks now, but still, it's not the same as your top starting quarterback. So they're the ones that probably would benefit the most. And one thing I want to say is whoever in the CFL makes the schedules did a wonderful end of the season, because you have Winnipeg and Calgary playing each other the next 2 weeks, home and home. And then Saskatchewan plays Edmonton the following 2 weeks, home and home. So, the 1 week they overlap with each other. But that's some amazing scheduling right there. I know they can't plan for what's happening to happen, but these are top teams, and you have them playing in the final weeks of the season against each other. I love it.
And that's the great thing about scheduling in general of that nature, and especially when you have a league of 9 teams. It's important to get the best possible matchups. Saskatchewan this week has BC, so we know about what's going on in BC. Saskatchewan looks like that they're going to have the easier of the 2 games. They're going to watch Calgary and Winnipeg beat up at each other. But after that, you said they have Edmonton. And like you said, Edmonton at this point in time in the home and home series with Saskatchewan has a chance to really shake up that Western Conference, especially with Calgary and Winnipeg, possibly beating up on each other around this time. And Edmonton's going to get healthy. I know Cody Fajardo has been playing real well for Saskatchewan, but Trevor Harris, to me, is an X factor for the Eskimos in this situation. Calgary still has, of course, Bo Levi Mitchell, which is the most winningest quarterback in CFL history, and we all know about his playoff record. This is going to be fun to watch, and like you said, whoever does the scheduling, and it ended up being a perfect fit for the playoffs and the way that the regular season is going to wind out.
Great. It's great. You're getting top matchups with each other. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Edmonton can figure out how to finish drives, because that's been their problem all year long.
All year long, yep.
Kicking field goals. If they figure out how to finish drives, watch out. They could be dangerous. They're my dark horse team of this entire playoffs. If Trevor Harris comes back healthy and they can start putting up touchdowns instead of field goals, you better watch in the East. If they're the crossover team, they may come out and push all the way to the Grey Cup, because Hamilton's good, but that Edmonton team, they're strong. That defense is strong. That offense has been very good outside of the 20s. So if they can get good inside that, dangerous.
And that's the big thing here that we have to remember, is that they're the crossover team at this moment in time. They may not be the crossover team. If Winnipeg loses to Calgary this week and Saskatchewan beats BC, we could see a team like Winnipeg dealing with Chris Streveler in this situation being that crossover team. This leads me to my next thing. In your opinion, is there really any team that is going to pose a threat to Hamilton realistically in the East? Let's say we'll go all the way down this list. How about we do this? How about we start off if Edmonton is the crossover team, do they pose a threat to Hamilton in the East? Like a legit threat?
Yes.
Okay. If Winnipeg is, do they pose a threat to Hamilton in the East?
Yes.
If Saskatchewan is the crossover, do they?
No.
And if Calgary is the crossover team, do they pose a threat to Hamilton in the East?
Yes.
And that's important because I completely 100% agree with you. And I actually have Saskatchewan as a potential threat to Hamilton as well, but they're the lower of the four, in my opinion. The Western Conference is loaded. Even
top
with BC,
to bottom.
Yeah, even with BC being 5'11", they are legitimately 100% still a loaded conference. And they've been fun to watch. The East, not so much. I'm sorry, Toronto. I'm sorry, Ottawa. Even Montreal at the beginning of the year.
I'd say even Montreal, not that much fun to watch. Let me put this out there. If Mike Raleigh was still healthy, and even though they may not have made the playoffs anyway, I would think they would beat Montreal in a playoff game anyway.
Oh, I think so too.
BC.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I completely 100% agree with that. I think Hamilton's just the cream of the crop, at least on the East side of things, which is no surprise. Hamilton may be the best team in general, actually, left in the playoffs. I know that Calgary has a fairly well-rounded team. Saskatchewan's played well. Winnipeg has some issues. Edmonton has some issues, even with Trevor Harris back, even though they could work it out, like you said, if they could finish drives, the Eskimos could be a threat. I just think Hamilton's the best all-around team, but even they, had a quarterback change at the beginning of the year, and there's no guarantee that Dane Evans continues this through the playoffs because playoff football is completely different than regular season football.
I mean, Hamilton has definitely looked like the best team over the last few weeks. They've put themselves up there. They've come out. They've done it in a time when Calgary hasn't looked like that. And I believe Calgary is the best team, mainly because of Bo, but also because of that defense. But they haven't kind of proven it over these last few weeks. They've won the games, but they just haven't looked like that. And if they don't get some things cleared up, they're going to get shocked by somebody.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really all there is to it, is absolutely. And Dane Evans is a guy that I do want to – I have to give credit where credit's due, because Dane Evans was a guy that when he came in after Jeremiah Masoli went down with the injury, I don't think anybody really ever gave him a legitimate chance to actually lead this Hamilton team to the point of where they've led him and where he's led him. And to be playing at the level that they're playing is fantastic. Calgary has the most opportunistic defense. They create turnovers at a clip higher than most NFL teams. So Calgary might be the best all-around team, but like you said, I'm expecting something to be shocking here, regardless across the board. It's got to be somewhere. But if I'm going to go between Bo Levi Mitchell and Dane Evans, I'm taking Bo Levi Mitchell every day of the week. And that's just because of his past and his record and his decorations and his awards and everything else that you can think of. Win percentage.
Oh, yeah, easily. I mean, it's an easy choice. But what comes down to me, though, is, if Winnipeg's defense and run game can kind of keep going what they've been doing, and Streveler plays at the level of Dane Evans, that team with that run game could be extremely dangerous as these games get into this colder weather. We saw this weekend with Winnipeg and snow. That run game could become more and more important, and they have the best running back in the league, hands down.
Absolutely, and that's the one thing that Calgary has been lacking, that run game. The run game of the Calgary Stampeders needs to tighten up. It needs to be more explosive, because we saw it this week between Don Jackson and Terry Williams. They did not produce. And in order for Calgary to be able to make this run, they can't rely strictly on Bo Levi Mitchell. They need that run game to be successful. And that is one thing that Hamilton has. It's one thing that Winnipeg has. And it's actually really one thing that Edmonton has. is a better run game than what Calgary is putting out right now.
Yeah, Calgary's been using this four-headed monster of a run game that just doesn't seem to work because nobody gets, a rhythm going in this with them, and then they just keep switching them in and out and using them on the return game. They need to just commit to a guy and kind of see what they have, because at this point, what they've been doing is not working.
Has your Grey Cup prediction changed? Is it still Hamilton at this point in time?
Still Hamilton. Until we see anybody really play at the level Hamilton's playing right now, they're still the obvious choice. They've been playing at such a high level.
It's only been a week. It hasn't changed on my end either, but I had to ask the question just because of everything that's been going on. So, and you know how it is. Sometimes those things change when we get closer to the playoffs. 310-876-8064. That's the number. Call in live, discuss it. If you have anything to give to the discussion as far as CFL is concerned. Mark, how can people reach you if they need to? Is there any way they can get a hold of you on social media?
Yep. Twitter, it's Angsty11. Facebook, it's just my name, Mark Angst. And then same thing with Instagram. I know we've been with the XFL draft coming up. Everybody should be getting on Instagram to follow along with that XFL draft because they are going to post a lot of things.
And speaking of Instagram, I did go out and get one so I can follow the XFL.
Look how happy our producer is.
It is Washington Week's AFN Talk, TALK, because they allowed me to put the A in there. That is it. I will not be posting anything as far as Instagram is concerned. I'm following it strictly for the XFL, CFL side of things and the arena and news sources. So don't expect pictures, but you're more than welcome to follow me. Every now and then I might share something at that particular moment in time. Twitter's at MWSquared AFN Talk, TLK, because they didn't allow me to have the A, because apparently there's a limit as to what your handle can be. And my Facebook is Michael Washington. Not Washington Weeks, just Michael Washington. I have the AFN Talk logo. You can't miss it. At AFN Talk across all social media platforms. That's another way you can get a hold of us as well if you need to. AFNtalk.com, AFNN.net. In association with PrimetimeSportsTalk.com, produced by the Alternative Football News Network and our producer, Harry the Boobs Bob. That's going to do it for tonight. We're on the eve of the XFL draft. Tune in Tuesday for the special.